Hello, I'm John Bushy, and this video is mostly about injector trim codes for our 7-ton trucks. If you do not have a United States Marine Corps truck, then you are watching the wrong video. I'm going to talk about what I did to my 7-ton truck. This may or may not apply to you. I'm not recommending this process, and I'm not giving you advice. You should proceed with this repair at your own risk. So, what are injector trim codes and why do they matter? Well, I was checking on some reasons my truck was not running correctly, and one of the possible reasons was that the injector codes were incorrect. So, the short story is that my truck had a hard time starting when the temperature was below 50 degrees. That could be due to a lot of reasons, but I remember checking the ECM in my truck and noticing that the engine serial number was not set in the ECM. While doing my research, I think it was Adept Ape, said that if you can get a new ECM, you need to set your engine serial number and the injector trim codes. So I thought, oh, the ECM was replaced in my truck. So then I started researching injector trim codes, because you have to set both. I found a lot of information on them, and much of it didn't apply to our trucks. And even more information wasn't available to us as second-hand owners of the trucks. But I continued to do research, and I finally figured out how to find the trim codes and how to set them in our 7-ton trucks. So that is what I'm showing you today. I hope it saves someone a lot of time and grief trying to figure it out for themselves. But first, what are trim codes? When fuel injectors are manufactured at the factory, the injectors can't be made to all work exactly the same way. Every injector is a little bit different when it comes to dispensing fuel. Some spray a bit more, some spray a bit less than the other injectors. So every injector is measured at the factory and a trim code is assigned to indicate how much fuel is actually being dispensed by that particular injector. They mark it with a trim code. This trim code is entered into the ECM, and then the ECM can do some math to calculate how much of an adjustment should be made to that injector so the same amount of fuel is injected into every cylinder. That way, the engine runs smoother and lasts longer because each cylinder is doing exactly the same thing. And so I checked my ECM, and yes, I was correct. The engine serial number was not there. So I checked the injector trim codes, and sure enough, all the numbers were 2300, which for our trucks is the default setting. So I knew that the Marines had replaced my ECM, but had not set the injector trim codes. I thought this might be the cause of my hard starting, but it turns out it wasn't. Let me show you the hard starting.
This is before the injector trim codes have been entered into the truck.
That was the hard starting, and it's not necessarily due to the injector codes I've figured out. I think I know what the problem is. So in order to set the injector codes, the first thing we need to do is go over to the engine, and we need to take the engine apart to get the number off of the injectors. We need to get it off of every injector, and it's just written on the injector. I'll show you an example, but let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the engine, and I'll show you what we did. So I'm on the truck in the engine compartment on the driver's side, and in order to do this process, you need to take the top end of the engine apart, specifically the valve covers. And so there's 3 valve covers on our engines. It's hard to see, but there's one right there. And then there's a second one here that says CAT on it, C-12. And then there's a third one under there that extends into the crew, the cab. And so there's 3 of them you have to take apart. And in order to do that, you need to disconnect some of the wiring harnesses. You need to take off this intake manifold pipe, which comes across down to there. So you take all that stuff off, and then you can take off the first two covers. And then we found it easier to get to that third cover to actually go into the cab and take off that plastic box in there. Some people call it the doghouse. So let me show you after we take these covers off what we're looking at inside. The photo with the valve cover removed, and a lot of the big heavy metal pieces you can see there, that's the Jake brake. So that's the engine retarding system. The injectors are kind of underneath that, and they're a little hard to see in this photo, so let me put up another photo. This one shows you a little better the injectors, but in this one, I've zoomed in and I've circled in red the injectors so you can see those. And by the way, here's the other side of the valve cover, and it's very clean. I'm very happy. My truck seems to be well taken care of because there's no gunk in there or anything. We didn't clean this. And on that cover, let me just point out there is a gasket in there, and it's kind of hard, kind of a new type of gasket, and we did not replace it. We just left it. It looked like it was in good shape, so we just left it. When we put everything back together, we used that. Now this is we're going to go into the cab to show you the next couple things, and this is the box that's inside the cab. We removed that whole thing. There's screws on all the sides of it, or bolts on all the sides of it. You take those out, and then you just remove the whole box from the cab. We're inside the cab, and we've removed that box. Now April's taking off the valve cover to show the insides again, and again, that whole big metal, heavy metal part is the retarder brake, the Jake brake, and that's going to become important. Let me switch to the other side of the truck for helping do all this work. She's a real trooper. So the injectors are way down inside the engine. Yeah, you can see them there. That's one of the injectors. That's the other injector. We need to get the codes off those. And the codes are written on the side, of course, not on the top where it might be easy to see them. So we need to be able to see the side of the injector. Luckily, that's an aluminum spacer there. We're going to remove that aluminum spacer. You can see that makes it a lot easier to see the injectors. The spacer is there because we have that engine retarder, the Jake brake. That's why it's there. And so here's the two injectors, and you can see the code there. The code on that one's 6921. You need the codes for all injectors. These are just the last two. So you have to write those down and keep track of them, because then you're going to use the CAT computer software to enter that into the ECM of your truck. So now we're done. We've written down all the codes, and so we can put the truck back together. So the end result of all that work was this list, and you'll see that injector number 5 is 6921. So we went into the cab and we hooked up to the truck. That's the connector in the truck, and that cable runs into this little interface box. Those two lights tell you it's working. And then I started the ET software on the computer, and I'll show you how to set those codes now. The CAT ET software can do a lot of things, but I'm only going to show you the one thing. So you go across to service and down to calibrations, and then when you click on calibrations, up will come a list of a lot of different things. One of those is injector codes calibrations, and you double click on that, and up will come the screen that will show you all of the different injectors and their values. And if you can see, number 5 is set to the 6921 like it's supposed to be. If you do need to change your codes, the default's 2300, 2300. So if your injectors aren't set, it's going to say 2300. You double click on it, and then you can enter the new code in there. Only numbers are allowed. And then normally you'd hit OK after entering that, and then it would ask if you want to send that to the truck. You'd say yes, and Then you do that for all the injectors and you're done. You've set all the injector trim codes. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it's been useful or at least educational for you. I'm working on a few more videos and I should be uploading those soon, so I hope you'll subscribe to the channel in order to keep watching my videos. Thanks again.